Hi, this is Natalie Callback, and I'm here for Creative Jumpstart 2020. Super excited, our ninth year, and I'm also super excited to have my very, very good friend Julie Fei Fan Balzer with us again, who I think, yes, you did. Every single year you were part of Creative Jumpstart. That's how good of a friend she is.
I've
She
tricked you from the beginning.
many, many friendship points in our friendship books here. So, a lot of you people might know Julie Fei Fan Balzer already, but I want to give her the opportunity to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her artwork. Hi.
So hi. So I'm Julie Fei Fan Balzer, and I like to make all kinds of things. I call myself a creative omnivore. So I happen to be in a quilting phase of my life. I've been doing a lot of sewing and a lot of fabric work lately. But I would say I'm always in love with painting. Collage is a huge part of what I do. Art journaling is mostly daily practice. I do a lot of stamp carving. If there's a craft out there, I will try it. That is 100% certainty. I love color and I love pattern. And I think, more than anything, I just love exploring the possibilities of what's out there.
Yeah, that is true. You are a jack of all trade and you do everything very, very good. That's for sure. So, this year's Creative Jumpstart theme is superpower. So, those of you who haven't seen any of the interviews or haven't done Creative Jumpstart yet, how it works is every year we have a theme that I send out to the 30 plus artists, and every day in January, a new artist will upload, video will be uploaded to that theme. The video is about 10 minutes long, so it's nice and short and fun to jumpstart your creativity. And for 2020, the theme is superpower. So if I would be asked what Julie's superpowers are, I of course have a long list, but let's hear from herself. What is your artistic superpower?
I think it's related to sort of how I introduced myself, which is I think it's curiosity. Like, I think that everything that I do is driven by the question, what if? What if I tried this on here? What if I did this? What if I put that blue paint there? And sometimes I make terrible, terrible mistakes, as they say, with great power,
Don't we all?
great responsibility. But I think that the moment so I used to work in the theater, and one of the things I remember a friend saying is that if she ever sat in a theater and the moment that the lights went down, she didn't feel excited, she would know it was time to leave. And I had that experience where I suddenly realized I wasn't excited, and I was like, okay, it's time to leave this. And I feel the same way about art, which is like, the day that I stop being curious, the day that I don't have a like, oh my gosh, I wonder if I could, or see something and go, wait a second, that would make a really cool stencil, or that's an awesome, idea. I think like that's the day I have to walk away.
That's a nice one to have. So, that was your artistic superpower. Do you feel that your in life non-artistic superpower is the same, or is it a different one?
I think it could be the same, but I like to think that in
Organizational. That was an insider joke, guys.
if you could see the mess on the floor in here, but anyway, it's definitely not being on time like Natalie, but I think my in-person superpower is probably a willingness to fail. And I feel like I have done that in my life a number of times, like changing careers, doing a new job, leaving a marriage, having a baby after 40, like just sort of a willingness to jump off a cliff, so to speak.
I
I hope
think
I
that
fly.
goes together in a way too, right? Like
Yeah.
curiosity, and you're not afraid, or maybe you are afraid, which is also fine if you are a little bit afraid. Actually, that tells you you're going in a direction. But yeah, just like the willingness to explore new things and and not to be too afraid that you would fail, right? And also I think we always come back from something too, like you know that even if something didn't work out, you survive.
You get another chance, right? Unless you're
Yeah.
dead. And I do think that like there, what is that quote? I'm going to totally mangle it. It's something like courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing something even though you're afraid. And I know that like when I teach art classes, like one of the things I do talk to people about all the time is the idea that like I'm telling you to be brave and to just slap things on there, not because it's easy for me, but because I've had to teach myself how to do it. And I actually do think, and I think this is something that you and I share, but I think very much that what you do in your art is a reflection of your life, and what you do in your life comes back and reflects in your art. So that it's like, if you can be brave in your art and do something that feels crazy, like ripping a page or covering something up, then it's like in your life you find ways to be brave, and it kind of starts to reflect itself. I mean, I joke about this all the time, but it's really true, which is, you know, I think that art has been a therapy for me, and I can tell on the days that I haven't made art, that I've spent too much computer time or whatever else, because I'm a crazy person. And, you know, and that's just one of those things like I have come to know about myself, which is like I need that outlet to make my like real life whole somehow.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's I mean, I have lately not had a lot of time, but it was also a little bit by choice because it's summer and I'm moving. Actually, we're both in the same, not in the same state. Julie is on top, expecting a baby, which by the time, you know, we have the interview out, we will now already. La, la, la. But we're both renovating a house right now, and we're moving soon. So there's a lot of time being consumed by all kinds of decisions. Definitely a curiosity and not afraid to fail moment, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not just time. Like that's the thing that I've learned, which is the house project is actually a creative project. And I do believe that we only have so much creative energy in our lives, you know? And so it's like, if you've used up your time, not your time, but your energy, like, you know, picking tile and matching colors and like making decisions about whether it should be the left or the right, or, you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. Like you actually have used up some of the creative energy that you would otherwise use. And I think it's one of the reasons that for people who are creative but have to have a day job, a lot of them say they purposely choose things that are more like administrative or like non-creative, because, you know, if you work as like a graphic designer and then you want to go home and paint, sometimes it's like you just can't. You're too spent.
Right, that's true. So this is actually something that I have been contemplating lately, and it's not a question you might expect right now, but so we both made our hobby to our job, being a full-time artist or maker, crafter, right? So what is your hobby nowadays then? Yeah, ha, ha, ha.
That is the toughie, Natalie. I mean, I would say reading. Can reading be a hobby? And I would also say that there are some art projects that I do that are not for like public consumption or something, that are just sort of for me, and I sort of consider that a hobby. I think, can eating out be a hobby?
Oh, definitely.
Because I take it very seriously. But, you know, I play a lot of board games these days and stuff like that. But I do find that I feel very lucky because I enjoy art enough that I want to make it even when it's not like for my job, you know, and that feels super lucky. But yeah, definitely this year I've been trying to amp up my reading because I have a terrible habit of reading crappy books, which is basically the equivalent of like eating Cheetos for dinner every night, just because, you know, it's like what people would call beach books or like something like that. I read like year round nonstop, and it's just, it's like, it's fine. Do you know what I mean? It's still a book, but like I've been trying really hard this year to read like actual literature, because I do think that it changes the way that your brain works, and it can make you feel more creative and like getting lost in a story can actually change, the way your work looks. Actually, it was an interesting discussion today. So Studio Art Quilters Association, otherwise known as SAQA, they have like a Yahoo discussion group. And one of the things that was being discussed over the past few days is they were talking about narrative work versus non-narrative work. And for anybody who doesn't know, narrative work is work that tells a story. Simple as that, right? And, you could argue that all work tells a story. But so the argument has sort of been going back and forth. And it made me think so much about whether artists consider themselves sort of like aesthetically motivated. I'm going for what I see and the look, or whether they consider themselves to be narratively or storytelling, content kind of motivated. And I don't think it's quite as black and white as that, but it's an interesting distinction to kind of play around with. And certainly if you're a person who likes narrative, books have to inform that,
right?
And the same way that I actually think, like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think that like podcasts inform that. And I do find that like, this sounds so weird, and I don't know if you found this too, but sometimes if I was listening to a podcast while I was doing something, when I look back at it, it's like I can remember podcasts like almost word for word. Like, it's creepy.
Which is super funny that you just bring it up. I had just a couple, like half an hour ago, another interview with another artist from Creative Jumpstart. Yes, I'm working. I'm kidding. And we were talking about if we would listen to something while we're creating. And she asked me if I would listen to podcasts while I'm creating. And I said, no, I don't anymore. Because the reason is that if it's very interesting, I'm concentrating so much on what people are saying that the actual, like, what I want to do with my artwork or what I want to express becomes like, a second thing. And I basically would just do, somehow the podcast gets like into this, as you said, you remember that would be basically, I would choose, whatever colors, quotes, journaling that goes with that podcast, and I can't turn it off. Versus like I listen to a lot of music, and I know some people don't like to listen to music for probably the same reasons. That I can just blend off, but I think it's also because it's not in my, most of the songs or whatever I listen to is not in my native language. So I do understand them, but it's also easier for me to just blend it out, like the lyrics. But yeah, I totally see what you mean about that. You can remember the podcast when you look at your artwork then.
Yeah, it's like sense memory somehow. It's creepy.
It is creepy. But reading is, yeah, I agree. Reading is such a big part of my life too. It's funny, I don't even think about it as a hobby anymore because it's such a like very, important part. I cannot sleep before having read, or I get up very early because I have a cat. So that's my favorite time now of the day after I got grumpy that I was woken up. But I read, at 6 o'clock in the morning because what else should you do, right?
Well, you don't just have a cat, you have a kitten.
Yeah, well, he's grown up. You will have a baby soon, so.
Yes, I will. And that will be a big change. That will be my hobby.
That way. It's a good hobby to have. So, speaking of that, I mean, you're so super busy. You're always super busy professionally and with your personal life. The house and the baby coming and everything, right? How do you actually right now find time to create?
Oh, you have stumbled into my favorite topic lately. I am obsessed with time efficiency at the moment. So get ready to be bored, but here you go. So I have a system now that has really been starting to work for me. So it's two parts, which is one, I've been keeping a bullet journal for maybe 2 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And I use a time ladder system which is basically like you can look at your day and you can say, okay, well, I have an appointment here and I'm going to eat lunch here and I have, you know, to do this obligation here. And then you can kind of see where the blank spots are in your schedule. So then you can fill in the tasks for the day based on sort of how your schedule looks. It sounds so simple and basic and obvious, but instead of just having like a general list, it forces me to kind of think about, well, how long is this task actually going to take? Can I complete it, you know, in this time that's allotted? And it also makes me more aware of stuff like, okay, well, if this meeting runs over by 40 minutes, then that's going to change how my to-do list looks and stuff like that. So that's been really helpful. But then lately, I've been obsessed with this idea of batching. So batching is just like batch processing. People might know it from like photography and stuff like that, but it's the idea that you gather all like tasks together. So for example, I would say you probably are doing a series of these interviews for Creative Jumpstart all in one day. So it's like you do your hair once, you get the lighting once, you set up the camera once.
I didn't do my hair, baby.
You just look so naturally beautiful. So you know what I mean? But it's like then you do like 7 in a day, and then you probably will wait and you'll edit them all together. So that's the essential thought behind batching. And a lot of people who are efficient, like you, do it naturally. But for a lot of people, it's like, oh, I do one thing here and one thing there, and I check my email, and then I come back, and then I do this, and then I do that. And the idea of batching is to maintain a focused task. So it's been hard when I've been traveling, but thanks to my doctor and the baby inside me, I'm grounded starting September 1st. So I'm going to really push the batching because basically what you do is you say like, okay, Mondays I do this. Tuesdays I do, you know, this task. And like the days that I've done it, the times that I've been like home for a long enough stretch to make it work out, the thing that has amazed me is how much work I've generated. Because I know that we have talked about this a million times. When art becomes your business, it becomes increasingly difficult to make art, oddly, because there's so many ancillary things around it. And somehow with the batching, what has happened, because I purposely forced into my schedule like a day that I said just had to be creating and stuff like that. And like it is amazing how much you can generate and get done. I once read a post by a blogger, and I'm trying to remember who it was, and I can't remember, who said that she did everything for her blog for the week on Saturdays. Like that was just the day that she did it. And I remember thinking, wow, I can't believe that you can get everything done, because I always feel like I'm chasing it, you know? But it is true, like when you batch like that, you don't even need like 10 hours. If you have like 6 good hours, like it's amazing how much you can get done. One project's drawing, you're working on another. Like, anyway, so that's a very long-winded answer to bullet journal, batching, getting stuff done.
Nice. Sounds good. I'm so happy that you got this. No, I'm just kidding. I'm teasing Julie, and I know that she knows, like, I mean it in a very lovingly way. We know each other. We go back, you know, like
many years.
I don't have a bullet journal, and I think what I do, I have a to-do list, but I also have actually nowadays an online or like a Google Calendar. And the reason why I don't do the bullet journal is because I know I will get lost in it with like drawing and all kinds of stuff. But I do the same as you do in my online calendar. That's one reason why I have it, or my, you know, virtual calendar, because I put my to-dos into the calendar, and I can change that because it's electronic and I can, you know, move things around. What amazes me always is how much more time I actually need than when I think I do. Like, I'm like, oh, you know, I'm editing these photos and that should only take me whatever an hour, and then I realized that I had no idea how much time I actually need. That is something that I'm still to this day really struggle with knowing, you know, how much I actually need.
So, I have been listening to a bunch of also like productivity sort of podcasts and stuff like that, trying to like, because I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to juggle this baby and, keep the job going. And partially because like I'm the breadwinner in our family, I have to work. So I have to make it work. So one of the things that I heard is, because that's a very common problem, is that this person suggested, and I thought it was interesting, that you actually treat yourself like an employee and you track your time for just like a week or something, so that you can say like, okay, I spent 4 hours today photo editing. I spent 2 hours today doing this. I spent 1 hour doing that. And then you can actually get a slightly more realistic sense of what time actually takes you. Now, it's a good suggestion. I haven't done it, but it's a good suggestion.
You try it. No, you try it. No, you try it.
It's a little bit like eating healthy. Like, I can look at the salad and I can acknowledge that it's a good choice, but I don't really want it right now.
Right. You eat the salad.
Exactly. You be healthy.
Yeah, exactly. Me tomorrow. I know that you have done this before, like many years ago when we actually met. You were into crazy quilting and stuff. But tell other people, like our listeners, how you got into this art form and how your mixed media work actually relate to this medium.
Yeah, so when I graduated from college, my parents asked me what I wanted as a gift, and I asked for a sewing machine. And I had actually picked up cross stitching.
Wow.
In college. I know that's a random thing to pick up, but I used to bring my cross stitching to class, and I found that I was actually able to listen better when I had like something in my hands to do, And so I knew from having done cross stitch that I had sort of like started to be interested in what making a quilt would be and blah, blah, blah. So they got me a sewing machine, which was very kind. And actually my mother has never been like a domestic goddess in certain ways. So like I didn't know how to iron. The first time I ever ironed was in a quilting class, which I think is hilarious to me. But like, I fell in love with quilting. It just felt right. But quilting requires an enormous amount of space. And I lived in, after college, I moved to New York City, and I lived in a teeny tiny apartment that you could basically like open the fridge from the bed. And so it just became less possible to do that kind of stuff. I still did some small projects. But I think one of the things about being like young and scrappy is that you break all kinds of rules that you don't know are rules. So the first classes I ever taught were quilting classes because I was just doing stuff that felt good. And people were like, wait, what are you doing? And I was painting.
Nasty.
I was coloring things because, I was trying to like use fabric that people had given me that was ugly that I didn't like. So I was going to like paint it and overprint it. And you know what I mean? It's one of those things where necessity became the mother of invention. And then I discovered through teaching that a lot of people wanted sort of quicker projects. And when I started to blog like regularly 4 or 5 days a week, it was really hard to keep up with it because fiber takes a long time. Like all that stuff, it's really a long time, where paper is so fast. Like you can churn out like 10 paper projects in a day. You're never going to do it with a quilt. And so I think I started gravitating towards paper because it was easier, it was faster, it didn't require as much space, like all that kind of stuff. And now some people have suggested it's because I'm nesting that I've started to do a lot more fiber. But I also think I have in the last few years become interested again in getting back to it. There's so much in common with making a quilt and making a collage. There's so much in all the things you learn about design and stuff from painting comes back into quilting. All the things that you learn about color, the rules of art are universal in some ways. But the thing that's fun about exploring different mediums, and I also think the reason people like mixed media, is that the sort of like parameters of art, how color works, how pattern works, like all that stuff is the same, but the restrictions are different. So like when you're painting, you can mix the colors. When you're quilting, you got to find a fabric that is that color.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and so like that's a fun game to play. And I've done some stuff recently that I've really enjoyed where like I've made art inspired by quilts or quilts inspired by art, and to sort of play with the line of like what's possible.
I love that. I have actually, which reminds me, I know you're very busy, but I actually have from our wedding. I never did a quilt, but so 16 years ago, we had our wedding, and we had everyone's do sign and do wishes on a little square piece of fabric, which I wanted to sew into a quilt. So the fabric patches are still all in the wedding box. Can I send them?
That's super cool.
I know. There's no way I will ever, like, I have thought about making this maybe on a little journal or something like that.
You can make a fabric book out of it really easily.
Right.
Yeah, you could make it into I mean, that's a kind of project to me that like it's like straight sewing. It wouldn't take very long.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it wouldn't
And
take
then
long.
I'll tell you what, when you come to visit the new house, you can bring the squares and we'll get it done in the studio.
Nice deal.
There you go.
Will you have, so you talked about space, and I mean, I have been to your place in New York, and I mean, even though I don't live in New York proper, but you know, I live in the metropolitan area.
Urban area.
Exactly. Will you, in your new place, in your new house, are you gonna have then your sewing studio in your main studio, or do you keep that separated and will put that in a different room?
So my plan is to have everything in one room. I currently have a situation. So first of all, I want to say that I'm extraordinarily lucky. But we live in a 3-bedroom apartment, and we use 2 of the bedrooms as studios. So I have a dry studio and a wet studio right now, which in some ways has been fine and good and blah, 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 blah. But it's really frustrating actually to not have everything in the same space. And it means like I now have double the scissors, double the, stupid stuff, like, double the staplers, double the this, double the that, like, because it's all the things that you don't think about that you need to have, and I'm often like drifting studio to studio being like, did I leave it here? Did I leave it here? Did I put the ruler there? Did I, and so I'm really excited to have everything in one room. And I also think because I do mixed media, and like a lot of the fabric that I do is painted, and a lot of the, and I stitch on paper and blah, blah, blah. It'll be really nice to be able to feel like each medium is influencing and meeting the other. What I'm trying to do is more like task areas, if that makes sense. So like there'd be an area that's like mostly sewing, an area that's mostly like wet paint, just so things don't sort of accidentally contaminate each other. But as far as like having everything together, I'm super excited about that.
And your studio looks awesome. I saw a video that Julie posted this morning. Well, you see it a little bit later, but you could still go back, or probably by the time this video comes out, she actually shows you the actual video. But it's a beautiful, beautiful space with a wonderful vaulted ceiling and a huge sink, and yeah, it's gorgeous.
I have my fingers crossed that it's going to be awesome. And every space comes with its challenges. So this space is amazing, and I'm super excited about it, but there's no flat wall because it's an attic. So all the angles, and it's an old Victorian, so there isn't even like the 2 ends or anything. Like everything's angled. So it's been an interesting thing just to think about, and I don't know how it will work until I'm in this space with no wall space.
Yeah.
What do you do for storage?
Yep, I know.
So that one is going to be very interesting. We'll see how
the storage thing is a huge one for me too. Even though, I mean, we have a Victorian house, but it's different. It's every house that's built in that time period is called Victorian, but Julie's is more what you actually think of when you hear Victorian, which is like all these little nooks and crannies, and I call them the perfect Halloween porch houses. And mine is an old, very narrow town brick house. So I have actually low ceilings in my studio, and it's a little bit dark, but also very limited wall space, which is interesting. But there's a lot of fireplaces and weird stuff and doors. And I was like, this is so weird. It's actually a bigger studio, but I will have less storage space, which is insane in a way,
Crazy.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's like, it's like anything else. You find a way to make it work, and that it will be fine. But I think the thing is when you have a studio, it's like having a kitchen. It has to be functional. And you can make a galley kitchen functional, and you can make the giant dream chef kitchen functional. But you if you learn to cook in a galley kitchen, you learn to do things in a certain way, which may be weird or backwards. And then if you suddenly move to a kitchen with a different shape, you're like, "Whoa,
what's happening?" Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, again, of course you can make it work, but it is frustrating. And I think there is a breaking in period where you have to be like, oh, that's not going to work how I thought. Or, ooh, this is totally different and not what I expected.
Yeah, and I think, you move stuff around. Like, I'm sure you did that in your old studio too. I remember when we had our apartment in Germany that I moved things around. And I actually even did that here in this apartment. This desk used to be on a different spot than it is now. So it is, you always can adjust. It's like, as we said in the beginning, just try it. If it doesn't work, you just move things and, try again. Second act.
Flexibility. I do think, that's sort of a life lesson along with an art lesson, but like being happy with your art and being happy in your life are both really based on being flexible and not like getting yourself tight with expectations of it has to be an exact certain way.
Exactly. And does it matter in 5 or 10 years? I think that's always a good question to ask yourself too. Does it really matter that this desk wasn't at the right spot for, a while? It doesn't matter anymore.
Well, a friend once told me, and this has actually helped me through some various problems in my life. She said, listen, anything that can be solved with a phone book and a credit card is not a real problem.
Yeah, that's true.
And I was like, it's true. Like, there's stuff that sucks and that you're mad at and you're, upset. But, like, those aren't real problems.
That's true. If you have, like, a weird bug in your room and it grosses you out, the phone book is your best friend.
It's true. If you can find a phone book.
Exactly. So, your fiancé? I wanted to say aber half first, and then I wasn't sure if you actually say that if you're not yet married, and then it totally blew me off. But you're soon to be aber half. Let's put it lower.
Let's ask, how do you say fiance in German?
Verlobter.
Verlobter?
Verlobter.
Interesting. That's totally not what I thought it was going to be.
No.
I thought it was going to be like 20 syllables long.
Yeah, no, not this one.
No, it's a quickie. Okay.
But, so, of course, I know him, but it's also now fun to see him in a lot of your little videos that you blog. So, and Steve, I know he's very creative, too. He does, like, a lot of stuff for fun with you, and I think he really enjoys it. So, do you have, and I know that will change too, because I'm sure you're thinking about, not about Steve, but thinking, you probably have some ideas how you're going to involve your kid later, maybe in art projects or stuff. But do you have any tips or tricks of getting family involved in your creative, pursuits or activities? And if so, can you share?
I mean, here's what I'd say, which is I think I have the perspective from having been married before to say that husbands are like children. They come with their own personality. So, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And
you can't bring the water to the horse.
Right? I think a lot of people have life advice that's based on their particular partner's personality. And I can tell you that I don't think I've been any different now with Steve than I was with my ex. And Steve's reactions have just been enormously different because he's an enormously different human being.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's anything universal. I think it's like you have to find out whether the people you want to get involved, whether it's your kids or your partner or your friends or your mother, whether they have sort of a tendency to want to get involved. So, for example, when I first started scrapbooking, I didn't know anybody who scrapbooked in real life. And so I roped my mother into going to all these like 3-day crops with me and stuff like that. And she was always happy to I would have to pack all the supplies, buy all the supplies, bring all the supplies. But she was always happy to do it while we were there. And she made lots of stuff. It's just that she never would do it when not with me. Like, for her, it was an activity that we did together. And, I had to accept at some point that, she wasn't going to become a crazy crafter. But she was happy to do it with me, And so you may have somebody in your life who, you can't give them a crafting kit. But if you're like, hey, let's make these things together, they'll do it. Or, I've been surprised too by people in life. There was the one Christmas where my brother announced that he invited me over and he said, we're going to make all the ornaments for my Christmas tree. And he had tape, construction paper, and scissors. And we sat in his apartment in Brooklyn and we made the entire tree full of decorations that night, And it's people have events or moments that they want to get crafty, which is always a good time to take that opportunity. And I think with Steve in particular, one of my favorite stories about him is we were dating for not that long, and so he wanted to impress me, and so he was like, "Listen, I know you're on this really tight deadline. Is there anything I can do to help you?" And I was like, oh, that would be so great. And I gave him what I thought was a really simple project, which I was making these tiny book necklaces. So you're making a book that is I'm looking around for something that is as small as these books were. Wait, okay. So you're making these tiny books this big, okay? And I was like, okay, it's really simple. It's just up and down stitch, just to bind them together, right? And so he was sitting there working on it very diligently. And I came over maybe 10 minutes later and I was like, how's it going? Is it okay? And he was like, Julie, do you see the size of my fingers? It is not working out. And I remember at that moment being like, okay, remember this and give him projects he can be successful at. Right. So I've had him do other stuff, which is I just need you to paint this piece of paper green. I just need you to, you know what I mean? And that stuff he's always been happy to do or help with or whatever. But I was like, let's just remember, give people projects they can be successful at.
I think it is interesting, it's important that we are curious about what the other half is doing in their things. So my husband, Jim, is actually very into music. He studied music. I'm not very musical, but I just picked up an instrument, and it has been very fun because we have started playing together, and it made me more aware too of what he's been doing. And I was like, wow, it's interesting because I always just took it for granted that he's into music and he's doing his thing, and I didn't really, besides being on the happy receiving end when he was playing in a band or with other people, but it has been really fun, and I'm sure it's a little bit struggling for him and tough because, he's giving me these jazz pieces to play, and then he tells me that I have no swing, but in a very lovingly way. But I'm sure it's pretty hard for him sometimes to go through this song and be like, yeah,
I'm trying to imagine just the two of you and him, critiquing your style and you being okay with that. But...
Well, actually, because the both of us, so yeah. Oh, honey, it's so wonderful that you give me some feedback. This is usually how it goes.
Right.
No, he's a very good teacher, actually. So, but I just, I don't live up to Yes. So it's tiny knobby fingers trying to play.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's also like, it's that old quote too, where they say like, never compare your beginning to somebody else's middle or end, you know, and I think that's tempting, especially with the internet. But like Jim's been playing music for so long.
Yeah.
It's like, it would be insane. I feel this way when students come to class, because I'm always like, you're not going to leave with something that looks like my work. I'm teaching you the methods that I use, and I'm teaching the ideas. And the fact of the matter is, if you could make something that looked identical to my work after a 6-hour class, I'm going to shoot myself. You know, because that means I'm not working very hard. I'm not trying very hard. I'm not doing anything that's difficult for me. I'm only doing, you know what I mean?
Right.
And like, that would be disappointing to me, not because you're so talented and you can do it, but because that means that I'm not pushing myself past what someone could learn in 6 hours.
That's true. But yeah, I mean, it definitely has shown me, you know, doing all the art stuff to be persistent with, even though I fail, you know, it's the same when you do something, you figure out a new art medium or something you want to do, and you're like, oh, this just doesn't work. You just don't give up. And it definitely works this time better learning an instrument than it did when I tried to learn the guitar when I was 16, because then I just gave up and I was like, what ifs, you know. And now I'm like, oh no, you can get that. You just have to, you know, practice and
practice.
Exactly.
It's a fortunate thing. You have to practice.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, I think our mutual friend Judy once said that she tries to be a beginner every year. She takes a class in something that she's terrible at or knows nothing about. So like, she was talking once, I remember, about taking like a tap class or something.
Yes, I remember that story.
Yeah, and it's like, I think that is an important thing always to remember, that humbling idea of what it feels like to be scared and to be nervous and to not know what you're doing and to really struggle with the learning curve, because I think it makes you a better teacher, blogger, you know, just a kinder person.
Yeah, I think it's super fun. Like, I remember, like, and we have talked about it too, that, you know, when you teach, a lot of people think you are a very extrovert person. And I think both of us are actually like a mixture. But so when I went to the music school the first time, I was super nervous of meeting other people. I was nervous about my non-existing skills. You know, it's all about like, am I gonna be embarrassed? You know, am I gonna embarrass myself? And it was super fun. And you get to know other people that have the same interests, and you also share other things. It's just a good experience to also be in that skin again, that where you're like, oh yeah, there are moments where, you know, you go to a class and you teach, and students introduce themselves, and they come and they know no one else in that class, and you're like, wow, that is actually really brave. You know, I always find that's amazing. And then at the end of the day, they have friends, you know, which is super cool. So another reason, by the way, why I think classes are awesome. So either online or offline, try to connect with your peers, because you really share that special interest, even if your family member or friends, you know, do not share the same love for flinging paint around. So, right?
Agree.
So that was super fun, as always. I love coaxing my friend Julie to talk with me. I will just like make up a Creative Jumpstart interview every week now. No, I'm just kidding.
Just a little chit chat.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Sign up for Creative Jumpstart through Julie's link. She will appreciate that. Julie, tell us really fast how people can find you if they don't follow you already.
So you can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. It's the same username, which is Balzer Designs, which is just my last name, Balzer, Designs with an S.
Awesome. So go and follow her. And thank you so much, Julie. It was fun as always.
Cheers.
Cheers.